In this episode, we're gonna take my RSX engine bay to the next level by giving it a complete makeover in Vivid Blue Pearl. Now, if we take a closer look at the engine bay, you can see everything is completely smoothed out and everything is nice and ready and clean to go. Now, we did use a process of degreasers in the beginning, but we're gonna take it a step further and give it one final cleaning, and I'm gonna show you what we're gonna be using. Basically, everything on here that's white, I want it to be blue. You can see in this area, the wheel wells, some of this area is not gonna get full clear coat, but most of this is going to get the full clear coat, so it's nice and shiny when you open up the hood. Now from the factory, this did come just a base coat. You can see we did a little testing already. This came with just base coat and it did not have the shiny look, but we're going for that shiny OEM plus look. We want this thing all glossed out where you can see. Typically, you would do this with the whole car disassembled, but we're working on this car in parts because we cannot finish it all at once. So when we go to remove the doors for the full color change, we'll just bring our color just in this way and connect the dots so it won't be a problem. It'll all look one color when it's done. Let's go ahead and get this thing all cleaned up. For the final cleaning, we'll use some D-wipes, and I like this because it's the final cleaning and these are pre-saturated wipes. So we're not going to be spraying the engine bay. Sometimes when you spray water or whatever cleaner onto the engine bay, we got so many crevices that sometimes it will never dry in these little tough areas, and you'll only find that out once you start to spray the actual paint. So these are pre-saturated wipes, and all we're going to do is basically clean up all of the areas, and this will dry pretty quickly, and we won't have to worry about any sort of dirt or contaminants. Now, finishing up on the cleaning, we took a lot of time off camera to get a lot of intricate areas really clean. Now, some areas might look dirty, but they're just stained, like the seam sealer or the undercoatings. They'll absorb dirt and they'll stain. So they're perfectly clean, they're ready for a sealer coat. We're gonna be using the Luma 3 Exodus with the Sun Pro light. Guys, when doing something like this, it is completely necessary. It's so dark in some of those areas, and we have this awesome light attached to the gun. And a great gun, a little nifty gun to get into all those little areas, as well as completely refinish the car if you need as well. So we're gonna go ahead and lay down the sealer. The sealer is going to help with any of those areas that might need a little bridging, those cut throughs or some areas where there might be the existing paint. This will give a nice surface for our base to lay on and to cover much better. So let's get started. So your first step is going to be this sealer. Now, a sealer is a thinned out primer that does not get sanded. Now remember, you can't just take your primer and thin it out. It's got to be thinned out according to the TDS, which is your technical data sheet. Now we're using here again the Luma 3 Exodus with the Sun Pro light, and I gotta say, there's no other gun in light combo on the market that is going to get the job done like this gun and light combo did. It's so dark and it's so tight in these areas that you really need to see what you're doing. Now, by laying down this sealer, there's no need to prime your engine bay. The only reason you would need to prime your engine bay really is if you have some bare metal, or if you're doing things a step further and you're going to actually, let's say, shave your engine bay, which is removing some of the holes or the brackets to make it look nice and clean. And that's a whole nother ball game. What we're trying to do here is change the whole entire color of the engine bay and keep everything completely intact. So if you have any surfaces that were different, let's say substrates, the sealer is going to tie everything together. Now, if you didn't catch it before, the whole entire engine bay is sanded with a maroon scuff pad, which is equivalent to a 400 grit, and that's well within the technical data sheet for your sealer application. Your sealer is going to go onto that surface, and then it's pretty much going to connect the dots. Here it is at the sealer, and take a look how beautiful the foundation is for our next coat. We really got everywhere. I laid off my back, and I got underneath here, got all the way underneath the carriage, Everything is completely protected and sealed off. And now this would be the perfect substrate for our blue, vivid blue pearl paint that we're about to put down on here, man. It's gonna look fantastic. So let's go ahead and load up that paint and get spraying. And here is the paint, Vivid Blue Pearl, one of my most favorite colors on the RSX. And you might say, why didn't you just buy one in blue? Well, I looked for quite a long time and I stumbled on the white, and well, I wasn't crazy about the white, but it was my second choice. I always wanted one in blue, and what better way to get it in blue by having Paint Society paint the whole entire thing and showing you all how to do it. So what we're doing here is we're using the same exact spray gun again with the light, and the light is so important here because it's so tough to get the proper coverage. We all know that blue is one of the toughest colors to cover, and without that sealer substrate you would never be able to achieve the full color coat in 2 to 3 coats. Now we're spraying it medium wet, and we're allowing it to flash about a good 10 minutes in between coats. Now I did apply 2 full coats, and then later I went back and I spotted in, which I'll show you, any areas that might have been light. Now what you'll notice if you're painting blue against a gray sealer is it will look a little bit light and it will look a little bit greenish. And that's a good indication that you're going to need more coverage. But what I like about this little spray gun, and I don't use it all the time, but what I like about this little spray gun is it's really easy to get into any tight little areas. Now I've got my PSI in or around 25 PSI, and I've got my fan at wide open, and I've got my fluid at wide open, and later on we make an adjustment to the fan to get into some of these tighter areas. Now when painting an engine bay, it's good to get yourself in a rhythm. It's very easy to get lost quickly, and it's very easy to lose track of where you're at and get spots that are a little bit light. So I like to divide it into different zones by starting underneath the actual wheel well, moving to the fire well, then maybe jumping across to the front, and then connecting it back at the opposite side wheel well. It's very important to get your rhythm down, because if you don't, you're going to find missing spots, and it can get overwhelming quick when painting anything this intricate. You see, I really got on all different positions to paint this actual chassis itself and the engine bay, and I really want to leave no white unturned or no white unpainted. And later on in this build, I'm going to go ahead and put this car on the lift and make sure I cover as much white as possible. And that's what I'm doing here on my back, getting as much covered as possible. And it really shows in the end that this is going to be a correct full color change. We'll even be doing the interior of it, but only in base coat, not clear coat. So make sure everything is completely covered in that first coat, and then you can move on to the second. Well, let's take a closer look. Here's what she looks like after 2 coats, guys. Now, the hardest thing is getting into these little areas. So the best way that I have figured out how to do it is to turn our fan down. So basically what I do is I take the fan and I turn it just like a couple turns, so it's kind of like a dart. That's not a dart yet, kind of like a narrow. That's a little bit more. I then turn this fluid in, because when you turn this all the way in, it's gonna put a lot of fluid and you can get runs in your base. So just turn this in just a little bit. Now, I kind of fog it in from a distance, so I never go like right here, but basically what I do is I shoot it from about 18 inches away, and I get a whole bunch of paint kind of just clouding up the area, and when it clouds up the area, kind of lands in all of the areas that need a little paint. So kind of like this, I kind of just do a little circles, keep it moving. This way it doesn't get any runs. And I'll go around to any areas, kind of like these little holes here, and I kind of cloud up the area. So all the paint goes into that little area and kind of does like a little bit of move. It kind of moves around a little bit, and then it will kind of get into all the areas that you need. And try not to get it in one shot. Kind of get it in a couple different times so it can dry. I mean, even in here, we turn a light on. You can see, even in this area, it's a little bit light. So I kind of just cloud it on. And you're gonna have to take a lot of different angles to get to this stuff, because you're not gonna be able to get it all with one angle, really not. I'm more concerned with coverage on the firewall, not so much this area, to be honest. This is more OEM, like I've been talking about. But that's kind of how I would do it for these tight areas. Turn that fan in, but make sure you turn the fluid in as well, or else you're not gonna be able to get to it. But the light definitely helps to show any of those areas that could be possibly light. Come in this area, you'll find in this areas there'll be some. So just make it a little bit better than factory. Factory's not going to get all these areas, but if you got all this removed at one point, you might as well get as perfect as possible. That all about do it. We're going to go ahead and give this about 20-30 minutes to dry up, and then we're going to go lay down the clear coat. First coat of clear, guys, we're not going to lay this on too wet. We want a grip coat. You see all these different areas that paint can just run all over, run off. We want to give it a grip coat. So we're going to do a light coat for the first, and then the second coat will be a little bit more wetter. So let's allow this to flash off. Now moving on to my clear coat, I will tell you I'm using the same exact gun. I didn't even pull the clear coat gun because it was still at my house at the moment. But I was having such good rhythm with the same spray gun, I just kept everything exactly the way it was. Now, one thing I did not do with the clear coat in the first coat is I did not use the light. And I wanted to see the difference. Sometimes with the light, when spraying clear coat, it's very easy to lose your wet edge. And I wanted to see if there was a difference. So on the second coat, I ended up using the light, and I will tell you, it makes a big difference because in some areas, like over in this area you're seeing, it's very, very, very dark. And it's very, very important that when you're doing any type of job like this, as you wear your protection, is because all of that overspray is going right into your face. I'm wearing a full face mask. If you're not wearing a full face mask, you're gonna have dry spots everywhere on the firewall, everywhere in between, because it's like barbecuing. Like you've got 30 burgers on the grill if you're cooking for a lot of people and you're just trying to turn them all at once. All of that fog or all that smoke from the barbecue is just going to go right in your eyes. You're going to start tearing. You're not going to be able to see what you're doing. You're going to have burnt burgers and you're going to have dry spots in your engine bay. So make sure you're covering up pretty good so you can get all these intricate and tough areas. And again, following the same rhythm. Now, one suggestion I'll have for you is the first coat, do not lay it on the way you want it to look. But I do want you to lay it on medium wet. I don't want you to lay it on dry. If you lay it on too dry with that second coat, it's not going to be enough coats or mils or thickness to get it glossy. You can get runs easy on engine bays, but you also can get dry spray much easier because there's so many intricate and tight areas to get to. So if you spray on that first coat with a little bit of peel but not too dry, then that second coat, when it goes on top of it, it can smooth it out and you can lay it down a little bit more. If you watch my videos or any other videos on YouTube, you do know that anyone tells you that they're painting, that the first coat has to be sticky and that second coat will just lay right into it. If you lay on the first coat too wet, it's got nothing to stick to other than the base, and it will just slide off of the base in some of these areas. I was very happy to really notice that at the end of this paint job, I had 0 runs. And in the past, I've had runs in different areas, and I was very happy to notice that everything was nice and smooth and wrapped around all of the slopes and edges perfectly. Again, just trying to get all those different areas, all those little tightness areas in this gun really did a great job. I don't always use a gun, but if for tiny little areas or tiny little things or even big jobs, you can use this same spray gun and honestly get really powerful results. Any gun that you use for a long period of time, you're going to get used to. You're going to learn how to use it. Now, usually I'll use the WS400 Series 2, but it was just too much of a workhorse, too much of a bigger gun to get into all these little areas, and it was not going to be nimble enough. And this smaller gun really packed a powerful punch. So we'll go ahead and get this thing all glossed out, and then we'll hand it back to the team. They'll start to assemble the rest of the engine parts, and then eventually we'll get the motor back in there. So if you want to follow more of this detail of the build, make sure you check out AHC Garage. That is the mechanical portion of this channel. Also, make sure you subscribe to Paint Society so you can see more of this build and the painting process. We'll have a full comprehensive guide on how to completely change the color of your car. Guys, this is Brian from Paint Society reminding you, don't overthink it. It's just paint. I'll see you guys on the next episode.